What about Kenya? Do we know for how long it's being concessioned to the United Arab Emirates?
I would like to say that this process is currently still at its infancy. You just saw what they are complaining about is a letter. If you meet a girl at a stadium or when you go to watch rugby, and you ask her name or you met at the university or you met wherever, when you have asked her for her name and you start to develop interest, you don't present her with a marriage certificate and tell her now sign here. I mean, there's a process.
You're still looking into it.
Yeah, you're still looking into it.
And what it
The visits will begin. Then you reach a stage where you declare to your family, I'm found a girl, I'm interested. Then you start, the families will visit to one another at some point. Negotiations will begin. If you are a Kikuyu, you'll do some rurashio, you know, and then there is a wedding day.
This is why Kenya Kwanza is making all the noise mapema, you know, before you guys go any far. A very good morning to you. My name is Millicent AROKA. Thank you so much for joining us on AROKA Media this morning, coming to you from Athi River, the Kenya Meat Commission. And I am here and delighted to be having with me today the former CEO of the LAPSET project. He is also a transport and infrastructure policy expert. His name is Silvester Kasuku. Karibu sana to the show, my dear.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
I'm glad
it's
to be
such
here.
an honor to have you here.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, you're so much into infrastructure and you know what's going on in the country. So when I heard about Kenya Kwanza telling us that, you know, our country is being sold, you know, the ports of Mombasa, you know, Lamu, Kisumu are being sold and we don't know about it, then I thought, how about I get to ask an expert, what exactly is going on?
I would like to say that that particular noise is actually influenced by political expediency because they are not telling the truth. They are basically lying. Number one, port concessioning of infrastructure by government to private sector for investments is not something that is so peculiar and just, you know, only being found in Kenya or being discovered in Kenya now. It is something that goes on worldwide. And the issue whether this had been planned or whether they involved the required institutions to put the frameworks in place, I mean, they were all done. And I would like to state that, for example, the Bath 11 to 14 in Mombasa had actually been approved by Privatization Commission over 5 years ago, and it has been on the website of Privatization Commission, even right now, as an investment that is being offered to private sector. I know that maybe there were a number of preparatory works that were being done, particularly in terms of documentation, studies that are usually required, so as to ascertain the correct value of the investment.
Let me take you back before you could, before you tell us more about this. You talked about concessioning.
Yes.
I'm sure we have so many people who do not understand exactly what that is. So could you just start by telling us what concessioning is so that people understand these ports are not being sold out. There is concessioning. What is concessioning?
Concessioning is actually the process of a government giving out to private sector and a kind of an investment for purposes of private sector investment and management. Sometimes you can even concession what you've already built. And then, in terms of concessioning, the private sector therefore goes ahead to even improve it and make it better and to operate it. And it is not for free. Actually, the private sector concessionaire pays the government. And to arrive at the value of the concession fee to be paid to a government, that particular process is usually subjected to what is called transaction advisory processes. So it is not like selling.
So Kenya is actually getting
value.
value.
Yes, because when you concession, then you allow the private sector to undertake more development. For example, Bath 11 to Bath 14 in Mombasa actually requires redevelopment. And that redevelopment might be requiring funds to the tune of over 40 billion Kenya shillings. So there is no need for the government to go and borrow at this particular juncture if private sector can find a business value in that particular infrastructure. And that is what is happening.
So then when you talk about the UAE?
Yes, yeah, and then when you talk about the Port of Lamu, the Port of Lamu was already approved by the cabinet around 2015.
When
for
Ruto
private sector, it was there in the cabinet. It was approved for private sector operations and further development because it does require a lot of investments. For example, just doing the equipment alone requires over 24 billion shillings. So why should the government borrow if the private sector can come equip it and operate it and actually pay the government for operating it? At the same time, it will be creating some sort of confidence in a number of quarters around the globe that Kenya is actually ripe for investments. And just to let you know that Kenya is not the only country in Africa that is currently doing concessioning of ports. We have over 10 concessions. Some of them are actually at the tail end of signatures. Others have been signed. Over 10 concessions. Even if I just mention, like Lobito Port in Angola has been concessioned to CMA and CGM of France. And they are investing $2 billion. $2 billion. If the government of Angola was to borrow 2 billion shillings, they could actually be running into some debt crisis considering their current status.
Yes.
Beira Port is currently concessioned to the Dutch company Conella. And Conella has been given a 15-year concession beginning 2023. The operations begin in 2023. That's next year. But they have already been concessioned to, they are currently investing about $290 million, which the government doesn't have to borrow. In Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire, the government of Cote d'Ivoire has concessioned this port to Bolloré, as well as Dutch APM terminals and Maersk. And they are investing $962 million. That's close to $1 billion. They are investing, and then they are operating, then they will be paying concession fees. And that started in 2015. Tema Port, again in Ghana, was signed in 2020, just recently. And it was signed to APM Terminals and Bolloré, and as well as MPS joint venture. And this particular port, this team is investing $1 billion.
So what you're saying is that what Kenya is doing is nothing new.
It's nothing new. In fact, this is the trending issue now. Africa is now ripe for investments. A lot of investors around the globe are actually rushing in to invest in Africa. And on the east coast of Africa, it's only the ports in Kenya that are currently now being concessioned, as well as the port of the port of that is in Maputo Port, has also been concessioned recently. And then you talk about Djibouti, which has also concessioned. In fact, Djibouti has attracted to the tune of about $4 billion investment, both in the port and the special economic zone. You will find teams like the Chinese are there.
So now that you've explained that to us, and now we know that it's not anything new, it is actually the current thing that is ongoing. What about Kenya? Do we know for how long it's being concessioned to the United Arab Emirates, and this process, where is it at?
I would like to say that this process is currently still at its infancy. You just saw what they are complaining about is a letter that actually just a letter that declared availability of an investment opportunity in this area. So it's just at the beginning. And I would like to give an analogy using the African, marriage process. If you meet a girl at a stadium or when you go to watch rugby, and you ask her name or you met at the university or you met wherever, when you have asked her for her name and you start to develop interest, you don't present her with a marriage certificate and tell her now sign here. I mean, there's a process.
You're still looking into it.
Yeah, you're still looking into it.
And what it
the visits will begin. Then you reach a stage where you declare to your family, I'm found a girl, I'm interested. Then you start, the families will visit to one another at some point. Negotiations will begin. If you are a Kikuyu, you'll do some rurashio, and then there is a wedding day.
This is why Kenya Kwanza is making all the noise mapema, before you guys go any far.
Not really. The country is, when you are writing a letter to tell a development partner about some availability of an investment opportunity, do you go to press and say that now we want to write a letter to declare that we have an investment opportunity? It's already declared even on the website.
Yes.
They were approved over 5 years ago.
Us to read.
Yeah, and the processes actually, like for Lamu Port, a transaction advisory packaging of the investment opportunity has already been undertaken. It has run for about 2 years, and it was supported by some of our most credible development partners to enable us to package this investment so that we can attract private sector to invest in them. And this followed the process. It followed the cabinet approval that now these investments need to be presented to private sector so that the government can also enable Kenyans to receive investment interests from both inside the country and outside the country. And it's not that any team is excluded. In fact, when these investors come on board, you might even find that at a particular point in time after they've matured the investment, then they can even offload it in the stock exchange. And you'll find a greater participation by Kenyans. And this is not even the first concession. We have already other concessions that were done at the port of Mombasa, particularly for bulk operations. And some of those people who are reading the statement were even the people who were, maybe the person who was the minister for transport then, who concessioned that.
Let me ask you something that, Kenyans really wonder about in many other spheres as well. That, there are things going on in the government, and we have another side of let me just say it, Kenya Kwanza. When something is happening and then they come like there is fire on the mountain, and from your explanation, they're really in this government as well. People
Absolutely.
are not quite able to understand when someone says, this is happening, isn't this person a part of the government that is actually doing this?
Not just a part of the government.
Yes.
Neck deep in government. And they've been part of the approvals. They've been part of the decision made to concession this particular infrastructure investments. So they are just criticizing themselves.